was my Unit 1 question. I was wondering what life was actually like at the boarding schools, and I just wanted to know more about them because people make a big deal about boarding schools. So I wanted to specifically know about Menominee's experience with boarding schools. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to include all of these links, but on the Rural Health Info .org project, I learned that it was in 1860 where Native American children were starting to be forcefully removed from their homes and sent to boarding schools so that they could learn Western culture. I learned that there was like different types of boarding schools in Menominee, and actually pretty much like the majority of Menominees went to their local boarding schools. Like I learned from, let me just make sure I've got it right. I learned from Menominee, wait, which website did I find it? Oh, from WisconsinHistory.org, I learned that like the first schools that Menominees were going to were in, I think in Green Bay, and they were Protestant missionaries that were like trying to convert Menominees to Christianity. And then after that, the Catholics came and started a school. And then after that, in 1899, the U.S. started a government boarding school. So I saw this one several different places. It was in Kashina, and it had 170 students and 5 staff. By the way, 5 staff for 170 students, that seems insane to me. Anyway, that's not the point. There was an article from the Shawano Leader from August 22nd of 2009. It was called Historical Trauma, Menominee Reservations to Address Boarding School Issues, where it was talking about, like it basically tied the boarding school experiences, and they called it the boarding school era. They said that it lasted from 1856 to 1954, and they kind of said that it was because of the boarding school experiences that a lot of the trauma continues to cycle in the reservation today. So they said that, so some of the specific things that they said were so difficult is that children were separated from their families. They weren't allowed to do traditional religious activities. They weren't allowed to speak their native language. And they also said that sometimes there was physical and emotional abuse, and that like it's because those kids experienced that they came back and they became alcoholic and suicidal, and they were filled with shame and despair. And they said that like a lot of the bad things that happen on reservations today are like tied to the boarding schools. So that was kind of interesting to me. What else did I learn? I think that was the majority of it. I felt like there wasn't a lot of very specific details in the sources that I found. I did see that it's on mpm.edu if you want to check out that link. They talked about all the different boarding schools in Wisconsin. I learned that there was an important one. It was called the Tomah Indian Industrial School. Like that one sounded like kind of a big deal, like one of the most important ones in Wisconsin. But it also focused on the fact that Menominees took over control of their own schools in like after restoration, and that was like a huge deal because even like creating the college was sort of a way that they were making up for some of the trauma that was caused by boarding schools. What else? That there were some people, some Native Americans from Wisconsin that were sent to the more like hardcore boarding schools like at Carlisle and Hampton Institute in Hampton. They also said that a lot of like the Wisconsin boarding schools, they said that in Wisconsin there were a few, I think they said 5 like actual boarding schools, but in Wisconsin they mostly used day schools is what they called them, and there was 12 of them. because they were a lot cheaper than boarding schools. So rather than like completely removing the kids and sending them away to like live,